Hello, good morning, good afternoon to everybody. Let me just quickly check whether you can hear me well. And I see a few familiar faces already. Excellent, thank you. Well, with that, without further ado, let us get started. A very warm welcome to this virtual side event entitled Enhancing Climate Change Commitments to Improve Air Quality and Human Health, Practical Experience from the MENA region, organized by the Climate and Clean Air Coalition and its partners, UNEP and SEI, on the occasion of the Middle East and North Africa Climate Week. I'm Martina Otto. I'm heading the CCAC Secretariat. And we offered the session because we wanted to provide an opportunity to highlight the progress that has been made by countries in the region to identify and prioritize these opportunities to reduce methane, black carbon, and other air pollutants in their climate change plans. And it will also include the first presentation of a preliminary the preliminary results of a forthcoming CCAC Africa assessment of air pollution and climate change mitigation, which really looks at what's happening in the region. And finally, we're excited as well to hear about the Global Methane Hub and opportunities to support national methane mitigation opportunities and priorities. Maybe as, again, a matter of introduction, the MENA region does face a significant burden of disease from air pollution exposures. Last year, the World Health Organization did update their ambient air quality guidelines for the protection of human health. They've been tightened now, lowering the concentrations of air pollution that the WHO does recommend countries should aim to achieve to protect their populations from negative impacts of air pollution. And already the less stringent guidelines were hard to be met in a sense, and in the region almost everyone currently breathes levels of particulate matter air pollution that are in excess of the previous less stringent pollution guidelines. And therefore, if you really want to protect human health, more ambitious action to reduce air pollution is needed. And fortunately, many of those actions are also those needed to mitigate climate change, whether it's looking at electromobility and public transport in the transport sector, or whether it's looking at cleaner fuels for households and industry. They can both contribute to achieving the more stringent WHO air quality guidelines locally, and at the same time help act on global climate change. And well, since these two issues are so closely linked, because a lot of those sectors that we look at that are major sources of air pollutant emissions, if we do things the right way, if we look at designing better integrated strategies and measures, there's a substantial opportunity to achieve benefits on both ends, local air quality and health benefits, as well as climate change mitigation actions. And it doesn't really matter which door we come from, but we actually do good on the other side as well. And that's something that the Climate and Clean Air Coalition has been pursuing since its launch 10 years ago. And we really are about raising awareness and ambition to reduce what we call the short-lived climate pollutants, and that is black carbon, methane, HFCs, ozone. And collectively, with our over 70 country and 70 non-state partners, we do implement concrete measures in key sectors, and that includes household energy, cooling, waste, agriculture, diesel vehicles, and the fossil fuel sector. And having focused quite a bit on the entry point of air quality, let me now talk a little bit about what happened at the last COP26. The Global Methane Pledge was launched there. Participants joining the pledge have agreed to take voluntary action to contribute to a collective effort to reduce global methane emissions by at least 30% from 2020 levels by 2030. And that actually could help us reduce over 0.2 degrees of the estimated global warming by 2050 and generate significant health and food security benefits at the same time. To date, more than 110 countries have signed the pledge. And well, we will hear from some of those signatories today as well. And according to last year's global methane assessment, the region does emit 40 to 50 million tons of methane every year. And that includes the second single largest source of methane emissions globally, and that is oil and gas. And there are significant opportunities for ambitious methane mitigation actions in the region to contribute to the goals of the global methane pledge. At the moment, the CCIC is working on baseline reports at the regional level, and that will help us to define further the potentials in different places. We're also supporting countries with their methane assessments, so that again will help us take further action on this. We also support countries, including 5 in the MENA region, to increase capacity to identify, evaluate, and implement strategies to reduce short-lived climate pollutants. And we will hear a bit more about this, absolutely. As I said, we help with support to strengthen institutions and engaging various stakeholders with responsibility for taking action on short-lived climate pollutants. And really we look at the identification of priority mitigation actions, evaluating the multiple benefits. And that's something that I wanted to emphasize as well, the story of multiple benefits by taking this action. And that goes all the way to job benefits as well. So today we're going to hear about the experiences and plans by Iraq, Jordan, Morocco, and Oman to identify and prioritize opportunities to reduce methane, black carbon, and other air pollutants in their climate change plans. And we're excited that we will also hear the first presentation of preliminary results from the forthcoming CCIC Africa assessment of air pollution and climate change mitigation, focusing on SLCP emission reduction pathways in North Africa. And again, with a multiple benefit sort of angle to this. This assessment is being undertaken as a partnership between CCIC, the African Union Commission, SEI, and the UNEP Regional Office for Africa. And I think with that, I've covered the different partners. And we can go into today's agenda. And I'd like to call first on Dr. Kenza Komzi, engineer, but also National Climate Change at the National Climate Change Center, National Meteorology Direction of Morocco, to talk to us about the CCIC's integrated assessments across Africa. And really, this assessment aims to demonstrate the practical actions that countries across Africa can take. And with that, I'd like to hand over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Martina, and good morning, everyone, and hello from Casablanca, Morocco. I will share my screen, and please confirm that you see the slides okay. Wonderful. So, of course, I want to thank the organizers of this side event for making this happen, and thank you so much for making me part of it. And today, I'm talking on behalf of the team developing the integrated assessment of air pollution and climate change in Africa. And I will be sharing with you preliminary results on North Africa. But before carrying on, I want to share the aim and the goal of the Africa assessment. So the Climate and Clean Air Coalition and UN Environment Program are developing this assessment in order to determine how development in Africa can proceed at the same time of the limiting conditions related to air pollution, and of course the set of impacts that this air pollution can have on health, well-being, agriculture, forestry, and environment on the continent. And also the aim is to understand the potential to limit climate change and what kind of impacts this would have on the continent. The scope of the assessment is that the assessment wants to be open and inclusive process as it involved African scientists, practitioners, and policymakers. And in fact, it links the experience in Africa to the international experience. It is an assessment that adopts a sectoral approach, exploring potential for transformational change in key sectors like energy and agriculture. And we mentioned the energy and agriculture here because we are aware that the situation for energy in Africa is unique and that agriculture system is fundamental to people's well-being across the continent. Some milestones and some ways to go. So the whole work started by creating a community through networks. So 100 applications from authors, reviewers, and modelers were received. And then the first author meeting witnessed the attendance of 87 authors from 17 African countries, including early career professionals. Some institutions are participating kind of the I want to say high instances, in fact. So African Union Commission, African Ministerial Conference on the Environment, and Regional Economics Commissions as well. And the projects involves also focal points from the Ministry of Environment of 22 countries. A robust modeling group is doing the work, development framework and scenarios for modeling, and different or many modeling seminars were done or led. And it is a consultative process that really wants to include all the experts that may be of an added value to that work. The results wants to be linked to the policy at the global, regional, and national level, and respecting the policy framework. I mentioned here the Sustainable Development Goals, the Paris Agreement, the Agenda 63, the Regional Equality Agreements, and the national determined contributions. And we have the commitment from the international advisory groups, including the REX, the AUC, and so on and so forth. So what is happening, in fact? So the scenario or the modeling scenario is based or is respecting two important steps. So first of all, assess what do we have or what we had or where we are coming from. So assess the current levels of short-lived climate pollutants, greenhouse gases, and air pollutant emissions, and their impacts on climate equality and health. And this is what we are bringing with us and where we are now. And the second step is to create different projections of emissions to reflect what are the trajectories for the future and what are the impacts on climate change and air quality. And the modeling development process is as such. So development the framework and historic emissions analysis, then develop the scenarios, the future scenarios that will reflect different development pathways and the implementation of different mitigation actions, then assess the impacts of different scenarios on air pollution and the impacts on the important sectors, mainly health and climate change, and then give recommendations for policy options that can maximize the development goals, air quality, health, and climate change mitigation, and of course, have a report summarizing all that. What about the scenario? So what I wanna really emphasize on is that this work is an inclusive process and that it's a process of review and inputs from a different range of stakeholders were considered. It includes the members of the core modeling team from institutions across the African continent to decide which scenarios will be taken into consideration and considered so that this will create the mitigation scenarios on different sectors, as I mentioned before, energy, agriculture, and other. So what are the results? And let us start from what do we have, as I said before. So here you can see the different sources that contribute from sectors, of course, to the emissions of greenhouse gases, short-lived climate pollutants, and air pollutants in Africa. And here, if, for example, we take the black carbon, the nitrogen oxides, the carbon dioxide, we can see that transport is a main source behind their appearance. Meanwhile, the black carbon is SLCP, the nitrogen oxides is air pollutant, and carbon dioxide, sorry, And carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas. So we can see that there is like an important overlap between sources of greenhouse gases, short-lived climate pollutants, and air pollutants across North Africa. And we can see clearly that electricity, transport, agriculture, waste, and household energy are key sources for mitigation, and we need to focus on them and create measures around them. What is the baseline scenario and what are the drivers behind greenhouse gases, air pollutant, or SLCPs, population and economic growth? So you can see here in the first graph, you can see how, like, what is projected with regards to population in the future by 63, like 100 million of additional people will be there across North Africa by 63. Meanwhile, with economical scenarios, we can see that the GDP will be 4 times higher by 63 compared to 2018, which is the reference or the year of the baseline scenario. So now what will happen if the status quo is maintained and no mitigation measures will be taken or will be considered? This is what will happen with the emissions. And here you can see an example of the PM 2.5 emissions across North Africa from different sectors. And you can see this important increase that we can be witnessing by 63. So we can say that particulate matter emissions would more than double between 18 and 63. And of course, this will impact human health and climate and so forth and so on. And greenhouse gas emissions would also double in reference to the baseline, and this will exacerbate climate change. So basically, what do we need to do? We need to think about mitigation measures related to the important sectors that are the hallmarks of the economy in Africa. And key mitigation measures were identified by the modeling team in this project. And these mitigation measures would avoid climate and air pollution impacts across all sectors. For example, for the transport, scenarios or measures related to electric vehicles were suggested. Vehicle emission standards like the shift to Euro 6 also, and shift to public travel and active travel. For households, clean cook stoves and energy efficiency. For industry, energy efficiency and
I'm not quite sure what happened, whether this is only my system or whether this is everybody else's. I still see Marcelo's picture moving, but Kenza's frozen. So I hope we can bring her back quickly. Apologies for that. That's the beauty of virtual meetings. Let me see. Okay, I'm sure she's reconnecting quickly now. Just give it 2 seconds so that we can get this presentation done first. I think it's such a nice one to set the floor for the discussions afterwards. I hope we can get her on board quickly.
We can hear you, Martina.
Cool, thank you so much. Let's see whether that works quickly. Otherwise, we'll have to come up with a different plan, but check with the back room. seems to be taking a little longer than foreseen. I don't know, I don't want to put you totally on the spot, but Chris, you've been very deeply involved in the report. Is this a point where you feel?
Absolutely, and helpfully, I also have Kenza's slides on my laptop, so I can give the last couple of slides. She only had 2 slides to go. Hello, everybody. I'm not from Morocco. My name is Chris Malley. I work for the Stockholm Environment Institute. Kenza was highlighting here that the second part of the Africa assessment is to really focus on the practical actions that can be taken to reduce that increase in greenhouse gas emissions, reduce the increase in methane, and reduce the increase in air pollutant emissions. The Africa assessment modeling has identified a large number of mitigation measures across the major sources. Transport sector, we're including actions on electromobility, vehicle emission standards, switching to public and active travel, clean cooking in households, energy efficiency and clean fuels in industry, and a range of other mitigation measures across the other energy sectors, and of course across the non-energy sectors like agriculture and waste to reduce methane emission sources. Each of these mitigation measures has a specific target and a timeline for implementation that were agreed with the modeling team that Kenza outlined at the beginning of her presentation. What they show is that there is a huge ability to reduce the increase in emissions that is projected across North Africa in the baseline. Achieving the goals of Agenda 2063 through the implementation of these mitigation measures could reduce particulate matter emissions by 70% in 2063 compared to the baseline. That would simultaneously also reduce methane emissions by 72% and carbon dioxide emissions by 60%. So as Martina said, it's not which door you go in, it's that you are having an impact both on air pollution and on climate change. And the scenarios that have been developed for North Africa as part of the Africa assessment really underline that. So to summarize Dr. Komzi's presentation, the Africa assessment is aiming to outline, not just for North Africa, for the whole of Africa, how the goals of Agenda 2063 can be achieved while maximizing air pollution and health benefits and reducing the contribution of the African continent to climate change. For North Africa, the preliminary modeling results show that we can achieve substantial reductions in air pollution across the region at the same time as reducing greenhouse gas emissions, short-lived climate pollutants like methane. Our next steps are to complete the modeling to evaluate what the health benefits could be from achieving those levels of particulate matter reduction. Currently, the Middle East and North Africa region experiences 398,000 premature deaths per year from exposure to air pollution, and the modeling team will be evaluating the extent to which those health burdens can be reduced. These results are then being integrated into the assessment report, which will then be peer reviewed. And I'd encourage everybody on this call and listening that if they're interested in being a reviewer for the Africa assessment, we'd really welcome that, and to contact the CCAC Secretariat and the Africa assessment team if they'd like to express that interest. The report will then be finalized and launched ahead of COP27, and hopefully will provide a useful input. So thank you very much, everybody, on behalf of Dr. Komzi. Perfect.
Thanks so much, Chris, for jumping in at the very short notice. We have Dr. Kenza Komzi as well back with us. So if there are any questions that are coming up, apologies, but the timing was such that we waited a little bit and tried, but we're very, very glad to see you back on the call.
It's me who is apologizing. It was a cat. I didn't understand why. And thank you so much, Chris, for saving the situation. Yeah.
it's all about teamwork, and I think it's a good illustration how things work out in our group here. I'm really pleased that today marks this first public presentation of the initial results from this assessment for North Africa, and these insights, they're so powerful as they're coming to the fore. And I think they can really help both in the run-up of COP20 to COP26 and as well the enhancement of the NDCs. And I think it's really, really important to highlight as well this element of community building. There is a community of those over 80 scientists from across the continent that have been working together. And as you can see super nicely that they throw the ball from one to the other and things work out very well. So now let me move to the presentations by countries on efforts to integrate climate and air quality action. And we want to emphasize particularly also country-specific barriers and opportunities. And we have a very, very nice lineup with Jordan, Mr. Bilal Shakrin, Director of Climate Change, Ministry of Environment of Jordan. And Mr. Bilal is also a member of the CCAC board. And just to mention, Jordan joined the CCAC in 2012. Then Morocco, Mr. Abdelali Dakina, CCAC SNAP project coordinator, and you'll hear more about SNAP, the National Action Planning. And Morocco joined the CCAC in 2014 and has developed its national SLCP strategy last year. So we're just as proud as you are about this. And then we have Oman, Dr. Jadad Al-Busaidi of the Ministry of Commerce, Industry and Investment Promotion of Oman, and also a member of Oman's National Climate Change Committee. I just get messages that unfortunately our colleagues from Jordan have to leave. Can we still give you quickly the floor, or is this too late now? No? Okay. Well, then I suppose we move directly to our colleagues from Morocco. And the CCAC has placed national planning and action at the center of its new strategy for this decade. So there's a lot happening there. And it will be very, very interesting to look into an example of a country who has gone through this, this process. So with that, I'd like to give our colleagues from Morocco the floor.
Thank you, Martina. Can I share my screen, or you?
It's perfectly visible.
It's perfect. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much for this invitation, and also I doubly honored to represent the Department of Sustainable Development of Morocco, and also to be invited in this important side event by CCRC. So. What happened? Yeah, some key indicators of Morocco. So I don't know how we can. Yeah, so you know, energy dependence of Morocco is moving from 97.5% from 2009 to 90% currently, thanks to the introduction of renewable energy and others energy efficiency issue. So renewable energy, the target for 2030 is about 52%. Today we are around 40%. And I will go quickly for those in these matters. So yes, but as we said, just Morocco is a small contributor in greenhouse gases, but we have at the high level a good willing to develop and to fight against climate change, because their impact are very, very seen, and especially this year, for example, with drought and with some phenomena extreme. So we face big challenges, and also we have a huge favorable context. As I have said before, I will go quickly for those slides. Yes, we are in our new in DC, revised in DC, we have as objectives to reduce by 2030 more than 45%. And we have part of unconditional measures, and the others are with conditional measures, and with the need of financing for implementing those measures is about 38.5 billion US dollar. As this figure show that the business as usual compared to the measure adopted, if we do them by 2030, we will save more than 45% in DC. Yeah, the Morocco also, or the Ministry of Energy Transition and Sustainable Development also decided to put on a program of National Air Program. I will check, I will go also quickly in order to save time. Four pillars consisting this program is having a network for strengthening extension of air quality, to reduce also emission in different sectors, especially in industry and transport, to strengthen regulatory framework, and strengthen also the communication awareness of air pollution. In our cooperation, the important cooperation between CCIC, UNEP, and SEI in this field of air pollution. Yes, we have prepared our NAP, our National Action Program, with different measures, and we have modeled, as I have seen, as I said before, but with the big or the huge cooperation between SEI and their assistants to do. Can I move to the other slide, please? Yes. We have modeled the different sectors, these 9 sectors: residential, waste, agriculture, and so on. And as we have heard before, we have the non-energy emission, the energy emission, and also the transformation of energy in different sources. Yeah. So we in this modeling performed by LEAP IBC, first of all, we have to define what is the situation, and what is also the benchmark with other countries, and regarding SLCP, regarding greenhouse gases, and others. So we have also since the beginning in 2019. Beginning the process of consultation with different stakeholders, public, private, NGO, and so universities and researchers. And we have prepared the first SLCP inventory in Morocco, and with development of a list of mitigation measures, including those in the NDC, and also the new one of specified new one for the SLCP. As you mentioned this figure, this modeling with LEAP do the double things also, or many things. We can also do our inventory of greenhouse gases that have been directed by the directorate of the Department of Environment regarding the UNFCCC, and also to have the different information and inventory for the different sectors in energy and non-energy. Yeah. So for the SLCP emission, as we see there, the methane is the big part of this emission, and followed by also a little bit by HFC, and HFC, as you know, is more powerful than the other gases. Yeah, the other. Yeah, we have also assessed the other emission of air pollutant. So here you have also the carbon the dioxide, you have also the monoxide, you have the particle PM10 and PM2.5, and the sulfur dioxide mainly represented in these figures. The impact of SLCP on health, agriculture, and environment. Yeah, we have assessed the different diseases caused by this SLCPs, like the ischemic heart disease, the stroke, low respiratory infectory, and so on. And we have in this find this aspect have been very linked the cooperation between the health ministry, and also where we have no data there, we have also the data from the EHME database and from the WHO and from the other sources of data. Yeah. How can I move this? Yeah. No, please return. Yeah, here you have also PM2.5 assessment. So we have the big part from the natural background, and also the 3 part from national emission and from the outside of the country. Yeah. So here we have just some measurement of the PM2.5 in different cities in Morocco, compared to what we have with the LEAP IBC assessment, and with the other studies done by the World Bank and the Ministry of Health. So we are in the same line in this assessment. Here you have also the impact of the disease and the impact of the premature death in different cities. Yes, here you have Casablanca, because as you know, Casablanca is the big city in Morocco and the big industrial city, and so you have those assessment that we have done with the LEAP IBC. Yeah. The impact on agriculture also is mainly caused by the ammonia used in the agriculture, and followed by waste and some industrial process also. The proposed mitigation measure, yeah. So those measures have been identified by, as I've said before, with a very linked and very cooperation between the different ministries and different institutions. And those NDC measures are already adopted within our NDC, and we have added for this around the 60 specific measures for the SLCPs. You have just here a list of some main measures regarding renewable energy, energy efficiency, waste management, and hydro power, for example, and so on. And all those measures have a great impact on reducing greenhouse gases and also methane and other SLCP gas. Can we move, please? Yeah. So the impact of those, as you say here, for the modeling that we have done with the LEAP. So you have here for the industrial sector a great or huge reduction by 2040 for this modeling. We have taken the horizon of 2040, and from 2014 to 2040. And for black carbon, for example, in transport sector is a huge impact for reducing, and especially as have been said before, for adopting electromobility, eco-conduit, Euro 6, scrapping all the cars, and so and so. And also a new proper gasoline and diesel, and so and so. So you have also here for transport also the particle matters. So we can move to the other slide, please. Yeah, in for the methane also in transport, you have also, as I have said before, a great a huge impact in reducing if we implement the measures that have been identified for transport, for air pollutant in transport also. You have here the comparing baseline to the implemented measure in the south sectors, and we have the freight and for passengers also in for transport. For the agriculture, we have mainly the action are in for the reducing SLCP in those three big sectors in agriculture and in livestock and in fisheries. So we can move to the other one, please. Yes, PM10 and PM2.5 for the livestock food is also a big potential of reduction PM2 matters. For the emission of greenhouse gas, including and mainly methane in waste management. You have here those two focused on those two mitigation. So the burning of biogas in landfills, and also the valorization of methane into electricity and to feed the public lighting in different cities. And we have two examples in two big cities actually are fed by the electricity from methane in Fez and in Oujda, in two cities around 1 million inhabitants. So HFC is regarding Kigali implementation, and also you have here the big measures of also in waste regarding reduction of methane, and as I have said, especially for with those the measure of landfills and burning methane. Yeah. We have also proposed a scheme of the management of this issue of SLCP with the implication of the involvement of the different institutions. Yeah, please. Next slide. Yeah, we have also proposed a system of MRV, if I can say it, and including the financing terms for the proposed action, including also the monthly assessment of different gases. Yeah, the same also devices for the doing this annual assessment, also for the follow up of SLCP and follow up of the implementation of different measures in order to reduce SLCP and mainly methane, because as we have said before, methane is the main big part of SLCP in this part. Yeah. Yeah, here we have also proposed a different sources of financing, and proposed to the Department of Sustainable Development and also to the owner of different projects in different sectors, So we have checked what we have at the national level and also at the international level, and also through the different financing, green financing from UNFCCC and other sources. Yeah, and thank you for your attention. I think I have managed the time. I hope that I have not exceeded my my time. Thank you, Martina.
Shukran. Thank you so much, Sadakina. And I think this provides an important example also for other countries in the region as to how a realistic plan to simultaneously improve air quality and mitigate climate change can be developed. I think it's a pretty powerful example. With that, I'd like to turn to Dr. Jedad Al-Busaidi from the Ministry of Commerce, Industry and Investment Promotion in Oman. And as part of her PhD studies, Dr. Al-Busaidi researched the potential within Oman to reduce short-lived climate pollutants and to achieve local air pollution benefits alongside ambitious climate change mitigation in Oman. And as we've seen from previous speakers, these types of assessments are critical to identify nationally appropriate measures that can maximize the benefits, and is encouraging that these are being developed. Well, I really think it's encouraging to see that these are being developed in non-CCAC countries as well as in those that are members of the coalition. And with that, I'd like to give you the floor.
Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity to present my work during my PhD. I don't know, the screen is with you, Martina?
Yes, we can see it.
Great. Good. So shall we start? This is my work, is about the 4 years research on air quality and on health and climate change, and what we could do in Oman to avoid the negative impacts in terms of strategies and policy, and what are the obstacles facing the country to go ahead with these strategies. So from the 2 questions I asked myself, is climate change a problem for Oman, or is air pollution a problem in Oman? I put the main contents of this presentation. Next slide, please. Yeah. So there are the main points I will go through within this 10 minutes is the current situation in terms of air quality and climate change in Oman. What is the baseline scenario and what are the mitigation scenarios I developed, and what are the obstacles to not implement those strategies. Next slide. So I estimated the emissions of 10 pollutants, CO2 and 2 of the SLCP, methane and black carbon, carbon monoxide, non-methane VOx, nitrogen oxide, sulfur oxide, particulate matter, and organic matter and ammonia. So this slide shows that the estimated emission of CO2 in Oman for 2010 is 50 megaton, in which electricity generations and transport are the sectors responsible for the highest percentage share of the CO2 emission. Here I show the methane and the black carbon, where more than 90% of total emission of methane in Oman for the year 2010 come from fugitive emissions from the oil and gas sector, while the main source of black carbon emissions were industry sector, oil and gas, and transport. This slide shows the SO2, the NOx and PM 2.5, where the emission of SO2 in 2010 came mainly from the industry sector, while NOx emissions came from transport, industry, and electricity generation. The most PM 2.5 emissions came from the road transport, which is more than 81%, mostly dust from unpaved roads. In this slide, I will not go through all of them, but for the other 4 pollutants, I will just highlight the the CO emission, which mainly came from the transport sector. So if we don't do anything, the chance to get worse is very high. Here is the baseline scenario. In the baseline scenario or business as usual scenario, CO2 emissions are projected to grow from 50 megaton in 2010 to 315 megaton by 2050, while emissions of SO2 are expected to grow from 160 to 1,300 kiloton by 2050, where CO2 emission growth trends is significantly steeper than others, as you see. We are making progress, but although we still can do better, therefore I developed 12 mitigation scenarios which have been developed, covered the 4 major sectors which considered as the most contributors to the emissions in Oman. The first sector is the oil and gas sector. I developed 2 mitigation scenarios, the fugitive reduction scenario and zero flaring scenario. I will not go through this slide. The next one, please. Yes, so by 2050, almost 100 kiloton of CO2 emissions out of 1,000 kiloton could be prevented via fugitive reduction scenario. And even greater levels of reduction would be achieved in emission of methane and non-methane VOx. For the second sector, which is electricity generation sector, I developed also 2 mitigation scenarios, the renewable energy scenario and the zero coal scenario. Again, I will not go through this slide. The other, yes. Here are the results of the renewable energy scenario, where by 2050, we will be able to reduce 100 megaton of CO2 emissions, and we will avoid over 80% of NOx emission that would occur in business as usual scenario, and half of those CO. The third sector is the manufacturing industry sector. I developed also 2 mitigation scenarios, the efficient industry scenario and the clean fuel scenario. And go to the result, yes. The efficient industry scenario would reduce almost 40% emission of CO2, SO2 and NOx by 2050. But for the clean fuel scenario, as you see, there is a sharp increase in the sulfur emission from the industry sector between 2010 and 2050. Under clean fuel scenario, however, there would be a significant drop in the SO2 emissions with a co-benefit of the reduction of CO2 and NOx emission as well. The transport sector have also 3 mitigation scenario, electric vehicle scenario, public transport scenario, and paved road scenario. If we go to the result, for the electric vehicle scenario, the results show that we would reduce the emission of CO2, CO, NOx, and PM2.5 by half by 2040. For the public transport scenario, next slide, we would be able to reduce CO2 by 5 megaton. It also reduces PM2.5 and NOx emission compared with business as usual scenario. For the paved road scenario, there is a dramatic reduction in the PM2.5 by 2050, as you can see here. And now I'm starting to comparing my study with the Oman NDC. Oman raised its obligation of greenhouse gas reduction by 2030 from 2% to 7% within the report submitted on July 2021. Next slide, please. However, as shown here, the mitigation scenarios of this study would achieve a 35% reduction by 2030 and 60% by 2050, which means we can do much, much better. Okay, so what are the impact of these emissions on health and what are the benefits of reducing them? Next slide, please. Yes, this study estimates that in 2010, there were approximately 711 cases of premature deaths from PM 2.5 associated with either anthropogenic and natural emissions. Such death will rise to more than 1,800 cases in 2030 and will again double, reaching more than 4,400 cases in 2050. However, 50% of the premature deaths in Oman could be avoided by 2050 if all mitigation measures that I discussed before are implemented. In terms of temperature, yes, please, the next slide. Okay, in this figure, I would like to highlight 3 main points. The first one is if Oman were to implement all the measures of emission reduction, the country could avoid 0.0003 degree change by 2050 compared to the baseline. The second point I want to highlight is it can be seen that between 2025 and 2035, if all measures were implemented, the temperature would go above that, the business as usual scenario. And this is because removing the cooling aerosols such as SO2 and NOx from the atmosphere would impact the temperature faster than removing the warming agent, the greenhouse gases. So it's expected, but need more study, that there would be a bigger change beyond 2050 here. The third point I want to highlight is the graph also shows if only air pollution measures are implemented without greenhouse gas and black carbon measures, the effect on the climate will be even worse, as you see here, and will increase the temperature above the business as usual scenario. And this is clearly illustrate that it is of vital importance to integrate air pollution and climate change. Next, please. Finally, there are some barriers which are facing the implementation of these mitigation scenarios in Oman. From my point of view, it is because of the policy. For example, the integration between environment and economic policies, it's not there. Also, it's not keeping up. No solid link between research, such as my research, with the policy development process. In terms of priority, there is a pressure on developing nations to grow their economies and remain competitive with the already developed nations. And this makes the priority between the economy and the environment. Also, in terms of finance, we need to invest in research, capacity building, innovation, and technology. In terms of planning, the long-term planning to achieve a balance between economic development, environmental, and cultural consideration. Also, effective monitoring and evaluation plans. Thank you so much. I have a stick to the time.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Not only did you stick to the time, but it's pretty impressive results of the studies that you've done. And I think a very vibrant call for the integrated planning and policies as well, really complemented by telling numbers. So I think that's really great to see. Thank you so much. With that, I'd like to move to the presentation by Dr. Chris Malley. And now I can introduce you properly, Chris, researcher at SEI. And you're really the SLCP integrated national planning expert. You're supporting quite a number of countries with the integrated planning approaches, with an emphasis on methane mitigation, and also the implementation of integrated plans. So we've heard about the substantial efforts being undertaken by countries in the region, but there's really a global community of countries engaged on the issue. And given your support under as well the CCAC's national planning activities with 37 countries in Africa, Asia, and Latin America, we hand over the floor to you to hear a little bit more about those efforts in other regions, and that could maybe provide useful advice and suggestions also to countries in this region. So a little bit of cross-fertilization. Floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And I would like to sort of continue directly on from Dr. Al-Busaidi's presentation, where she outlined in incredible detail how Oman can do much better in terms of enhancing its climate change commitment while achieving human health benefits for air quality. I think that's a fantastic demonstration, and I really like to start my presentations by presenting this graph from a study by the European Commission Joint Research Centre that shows exactly what Dr. Al-Busaidi has shown for Oman at the global scale. They analysed what level of air pollution emission reductions would be achieved from implementing the 2015 NDCs. And they found that globally, the air pollution emission reductions from the 2015 NDCs, when the Paris Agreement was signed, were sufficient to reduce exposure to air pollution and reduce about 400,000 premature deaths per year. But the crucial point that is underlined by what Dr. Al-Busaidi said is that there is a substantial health benefit if countries increase their climate change mitigation ambition. If all countries in the world increase their climate change mitigation ambition to be consistent with 2 degrees of warming, never mind 1.5 degrees, then the additional air pollution reductions achieved alongside that would avoid over 1 million premature deaths per year, 1 million premature deaths in 2050, if the Paris Agreement targets are met. So we need to see nationally determined contributions and countries' climate change plans as also being health plans. I think Dr. Al-Busaidi and Dr. Dakina outlined very clearly how you can undertake these technical assessments of how a country can identify and evaluate mitigation measures that achieve these benefits within national contexts. But of course, we need to move them towards implementation to actually realize these benefits on the ground. And that's really been the goal of the Climate and Clean Air Coalition's national planning activities since the inception of the CCAC back in 2012. And as Martina said, there are 37 countries that are working on national planning now in Latin America, Africa, Asia, and in Eastern Europe. And there is a whole range of activities that I think countries in the Middle East and North Africa could also benefit from to build capacity and to be able to integrate air pollution benefits, short-lived climate pollutant mitigation into their planning. The foundation of the CCAC's work on national short-lived climate pollutant planning is building capacity to understand the major emission sources, to evaluate different mitigation options, and to understand what the benefits are of reducing emissions. So the work that Mr. Dakina and that Dr. Al-Busaidi presented is really at the core of the efforts that the CCAC has put forward to improve the scientific information, but also the national capacity to understand these different emission sources. And these are just some examples of where countries have moved forward with the development of their emission inventories. But I think the key point that Dr. Al-Busaidi made at the end of her presentation on the barriers. How do you get research into the policy development process? This is something where I think the CCAC and its partners have a lot to offer in terms of how you conduct research in a way that can directly feed into the development of policies and plans. 10 Climate and Clean Air Coalition partner countries have developed national action plans to reduce short-lived climate pollutants that outline how methane can be reduced from agriculture waste and oil and gas, how black carbon and other air pollutants can be reduced from transport or agricultural burning. That analysis has been conducted, but it's been conducted in a planning process that involves multiple other elements that allows stakeholders across government and civil society to endorse that plan and for it to then move forward and be endorsed at high political level. So this involves extensive stakeholder engagement throughout the process, making sure that those ministries that would be responsible for the implementation of measures in the transport or oil and gas sector are informed and part of that process all the way through. It's about making sure, as Mr. Dakina said, that there's a robust monitoring and evaluation plan so that when the plan is developed, it can move forward and we can evaluate the effects of it. And that's one of the things that a few CCAC partner countries have been working on as they've moved forward with the implementation of their national SLCP plans. This implementation has involved multiple strategies, and I think the speaker after me is going to talk about how international funding can support action on methane specifically. But there are also incidences where national SLCP plans have been integrated into national budget appropriation processes and national development plans. So we also need to think about that as a vehicle for funding. For example, in the Maldives, the development of national fuel quality and vehicle emission standards, having been included and endorsed by the Minister of Environment and Transport in their National Action Plan on Air Pollutants, was then integrated into the government's 4-year program, the Strategic Action Plan. In Nigeria, their annual progress report on the implementation of their National Action Plan on Short-Lived Climate Pollutants involves a national budget assessment that identifies all of the projects in the national budget appropriation bills that will have an impact on short-lived climate pollutants. So there's a tracking of national budget and how it is being allocated to activities that could have benefits for short-lived climate pollutant mitigation. And then we come to the question of nationally determined contributions, NDCs. We know that in COP26 in Glasgow, countries were invited to submit enhanced NDCs for COP27 in Egypt. And this is necessary if we're going to keep if we're going to be able to have sufficiently ambitious climate plans to limit global temperature to 1.5 degrees, but also if we're going to achieve the substantial reductions in air pollutants and health that we need to achieve. A wide number of CCAC countries effectively integrated short-lived climate pollutants into their climate change plans in the updated NDCs that was submitted for COP26. And it's a shame that colleagues from Iraq were not able to speak today because they have included actions on reducing fugitive methane emissions from oil and gas in their updated NDC, which is absolutely essential to be able to meet the goals of the Global Methane Pledge. As Martina mentioned at the start, the methane emissions for the region are 40 to 50 million tons. That's 13% of global methane emissions. To achieve the pledge, we need to reduce methane emissions by 11 million tons per year. So action in this region is absolutely essential to be able to achieve the goals of that. What these examples show here from countries in other regions like Chile, Colombia, Mongolia, Bangladesh, Costa Rica, they identify clear ways in which NDCs, the ambition of NDCs can be enhanced, informed by assessments like we've seen conducted for Oman by Dr. Al-Busaidi. And just to finish, a lot of the work that has been done within the national planning that the CCAC has conducted has now been taken and developed into practical guidance that countries can use to take the lessons and best practices from countries in other regions or the same region and understand how they can apply it within their own national context. So the CCAC has a guidance document on how SLCPs and air pollutants can be integrated into NDCs, and the CCAC, SEI, Ether, and the Initiative for Climate Action Transparency are now developing a guide that will show how those commitments on SLCPs can be integrated into climate change monitoring and transparency frameworks, so that we are not making commitments that are then not acted upon, so that we can robustly monitor the levels of SLCPs and air pollutants alongside greenhouse gases and monitor the implementation of specific mitigation measures. So we need both sides. We need the ambitious commitments, but also to make sure that we're monitoring them. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Chris, for this presentation and bringing not only some experience from the other regions into play, but also highlighting the tools that are there to really help take action further. I should have indeed mentioned as well that unfortunately our colleagues from Jordan and from Iraq were not able to join us. It's the difficulties with holding a virtual meeting during one that's happening in person. So there are different things that are coming up that require the immediate sort of in-person presence in other sessions, but we'll make good on that. I'm sure there will be other opportunities to zoom in on those two experiences. Our previous presentations have highlighted the opportunity, the ambition, and the country actions with methane action integrated into key planning and policy processes. And now we really need to be moving to implementation to address those multiple barriers. And we heard finance as one, and our final presentation will come from the Global Methane Hub, which has the explicit goal of providing funding and support to countries to move forward in their methane reduction activities. So addressing barriers straight on. Marcelo Mena, we have the pleasure to have him with us. He is the CEO of the newly established Global Methane Hub, and he is also an old hand to the CCAC, a long-term partner, as he had a very critical role as when he was the Minister of Environment of Chile, and as in that function as well, the co-chair of the CCAC for quite some time. So now we have him back in his new function, and we welcome his reflections and learn how countries in the region can be supported. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Martina. I'll go in and present you a background. You guys already know this. I'll go fast, but obviously, looking at methane and its role in the recent warming, it changes the way that we look at this, because as we are reaching the 1.5 degree threshold of dangerous anthropogenic warming, it's crucial to do what we do this decade into preventing that warming. And so the Global Methane Assessment has shown excellent work. It was a great report that allowed us to see where the sources are of methane, and in which we see the agricultural, the fossil fuel, and the waste sector being very important, and the multiple benefits that I'm sure we could get many more as we include more different reductions of co-pollutants that occur when we reduce methane. I wanted to tell you how things have changed, For example, when you look at the short-term warming potential, I did this exercise recently for Chile, in which, for example, when you look at the warming potential for 100 years versus 20 years, what's going to happen to the next 100 years versus the short term, we could see the increase of the contribution of methane of that warming. And this is something that you'll see everywhere else that this is calculated, a much more importance of sectors that we have maybe not focused on enough, which is the agricultural and the waste sector. And we have this methane pledge. Many of those who presented have joined the methane pledge that was launched in COP26. But obviously, we know what we need to do for in the case of fossil fuels, but we haven't established all the measures that we probably could if we think outside the box in the agricultural and waste sector. And many of these measures are going to be cost negative or cause no additional cost. And we also have to think about methane mitigation, especially for the MENA region, in terms of the co-benefits we achieve in terms of the SDGs and on energy poverty, energy access, the issues of agricultural productivity are all things that we must bear in mind at the center of how we design policies to mitigate methane. Now, satellite information will provide us new data, and things will change. Recently, a report showed that there's around 9% methane leaking in fossil fuel extraction in New Mexico. If we take those values, if leaking is over 5% in the power sector, in the natural gas, and that's used for power generation, unfortunately, natural gas will be equivalent to coal generation in terms of emissions. And so therefore, plugging those leaks will be crucial to really attest whether natural gas is a transition fuel or whether it is not. Also, in the case of the livestock and other sectors, including the landfill sector, the waste sector, we have to acknowledge that these are very big emissions. For example, Buenos Aires' landfill is actually visible from space. And the largest point sources that Carbon Mapper, which did these images, which is a satellite platform that will be launched next year that is testing its instruments in aircraft. They have what they saw in California was that the largest point sources were actually not energy sector, but actually was landfills, which goes to show that we could still do much more. And now the Methane Hub will have program directors for the agricultural, the waste sector, and the energy sector. And we'll have regional directors that will focus specifically on the emissions. And so if we're thinking Latin America, you could see, for example, a lot of this is enteric emission, enteric fermentation from livestock production. In other places like China, it will be coal mining emissions that occur. And in other places, for example, in South Asia, it'll be the dairy sector. We will find and focus and support the regions as proportionate to the emissions that they are causing. And so if we look at what we can do in methane mitigation, fossil fuel mitigation, we see that stopping that flaring is really important, but also focus on things that are very relevant in places that are exposed to environmental justice issues, because sometimes having better operations of the oil and gas sector means better safety, better exposure, lower exposure to toxic compounds. And we need to be looking at all those benefits. In the agricultural sector, there's multiple things that we could do, but we should focus on the fact that we could also increase other benefits. If we are reducing in Brazil, the methane emissions, we will also reduce deforestation, and there will be lower air pollution. If we also reduce methane through the emissions in the operations, we will also reduce ammonia, which is a very important precursor to particulate matter in multiple places, including the U. So I think it's really important that we also always leverage as many benefits as we can. So as we've seen in the proven formula that CCAC promotes, that we have local tangible benefits that facilitate the political economy of taking measures against difficult sectors. And then things change in terms of this, and this is really something that we need to be doing on everything, because the methane agenda and the short-term warming potential and the measures that we need to take now actually change the way that we see day-to-day measures. And this is, to me, very, very important, because, for example, we might have electric cars, we might have power generation that's solar, but if we are ignoring what we eat, which is something we decide every day, we are also increasing our emissions substantially. In the waste sector, we will be working with other partners, including the CCAC, the World Bank, for example. But some of the measures that we could already see in the report by EIA and Changing Markets that will come out and Gaia this week, we'll see that there's things that we could do. For example, reducing the amount of the volume of surplus food, or divert waste from being disposed in the landfill and using food banks, or for example, animal feed or other sources. We could also do composting. And there's an excellent project that was a collaboration in the context of CCAC with the Chilean and Canadian government called Recycle Organics, has very much focused on this. And we can see, for example, if we compost and divert the waste from the landfills, we can reduce emissions of that sector by around 95%. Because there's something that we also have to acknowledge. With the short-term warming potential, 1 kilogram of organic waste generates 3 kilograms of CO2 emissions, which is as emissions intensive as copper and 3 times more emissions intensive than cement. So we thought these things were not important for a while, but now we must take action again on what we had forgotten to do: the waste agriculture, and of course, the methane emissions in the oil and gas sector, which according to the EIA, are actually underestimated by 70%. So this is the Global Methane Hub is a $330 million philanthropic effort to align funding on methane mitigation. We'll focus on the main sectors. We'll support methane pledge signatories and actually support those who want to go beyond. We want to collaborate in advocacy at all scales. We will be looking at the highest impact areas with an entrepreneurial attitude, hoping to support those who want to lead. And in Santiago, Chile, with offices in Copenhagen, Washington, D.C., and California. So thank you so much for your time, and we are here ready to support your efforts to go and mitigate methane.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Marcelo. Fantastic overview, and also bringing in some of the experience that you had concretely in Chile. And I think, one of the things that I heard loud and clear was a barrier that Dr. Al-Busaidi mentioned, and it was about, well, what are we doing while we're developing our economies? Isn't there something that doesn't go together? And yes, it can go together. And what you just showed, there were a few examples where you can put it to productive use. So from the organic waste via composting to productive use, but just as well the message on agriculture, where we heard that, well, we can increase productivity as well, and at the very minimum, actually reduce the crop losses as well. So I think there's a whole story that we need to tell differently, and we've started doing that, and the narrative is pretty powerful. I think that comes out very clearly. I think it's clear as well that within the region, there's huge potential and on the different sectors, coming from an air quality perspective, coming from a climate perspective, but bringing it together. And the moment we tell that story that way, it is powerful, and it leads us to a higher level of recognition of the opportunities as well. I think we heard a very, very strong call for the assessments. We need them to make this case, to move forward, to identify the key areas of action. And Marcelo, your slide was really good, showing it shifts from one region to the other, from one country to the other. Obviously, we need to take that into account. At the same time, we do know as well that, well, in pretty much all places, transport is a big issue, waste is a big issue, and definitely the food side as well. And obviously, not only with the current geopolitical climate, we see that the energy transition is such a critical one as well. And we have a real opportunity to make a contribution to that with this as well. We heard a vibrant talk about the planning, the integrated planning and the integrated policies, how this is starting to happen. This has a critical role also in driving those enhanced NDCs that we need to see. we heard how important the institutional anchoring is. So it is someone's business, but not only someone's, but how do you connect with the different parts of a house, being, you know, the country government, how they can actually work together. So it's not only the matter of someone sitting in the Ministry of Environment, but connecting to energy, connecting to agriculture, and so on. So that's super important. And really it is about how do we address the barriers that have been identified in the most effective manner. And I think here, with the different tools that we heard about, that we have at our disposal, the offer from the Climate and Clean Air Coalition, but now as well from the Methane Hub, is really on the table to help move the needle, shift the needle as quickly as we can. And again, Marcelo mentioned very clearly and vibrantly the opportunity that we have to reduce concentrations this decade. And that is such a critical, I really want all of you to leave that session with that thought in mind, that yes, we need to take action on decarbonization. That needs to continue and needs to continue full speed. But there's a whole suite of tools and measures that we've not paid sufficiently attention to, but those are the ones that help us to avoid some of those critical tipping points, because they allow us to reduce concentrations of emissions this decade. And that's really a really key thought. So it's parallel action on those tracks. And maybe with that, well, that's maybe good enough as a summary, but I'd like to offer Marcelo a last word if you'd like.
Oh yeah, that's definitely. Thank you. There's so many things that we could do. And if you connect, if you want to write to me, any of you, we could start discussing bilaterally. We will be supporting the CCAC and many of these efforts. We really hope that by COP27, we have more countries actually using this opportunity to ratchet up their ambition to include methane mitigation targets. There's many things that we could do. In the case of Africa, I had just a discussion with the champions of the COP26 and 25, how we could also actually leapfrog, go straight to the things that we want to do. Maybe we have incomplete waste management, and we'll be able to reduce open burning. If we have solid fuels that are dirty and causing deforestation for use, which has huge gender issues in the Africa region, we could go straight to electrical. Now we have research that shows that the indoor air quality actually decreases many times when we have these fuels that were good maybe 30 years ago, but are probably not as good for our climate future. So we stand by and ready to support those who want to lead. And thank you for your time, Martina.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I would like to thank all our speakers. You've been fantastic. This was so rich, starting from the glimpse that we got on the Africa report. And I really look forward to seeing this coming out later in the year. It will be a powerful driver for action. Thank you to our countries for having shared where you stand, what you've done. This is really a source of inspiration for everybody to be able to go forward. SCI as a strong contributor to all this work, really helping, providing the country support. I think that was very, very powerful as well. And finally, obviously, with the Methane Hub, the strong cooperation in also putting some financial means behind the action to enable everybody to take action forward. With that, the session has been recorded. We'll use it on our website, so everybody who has missed the session will be still able to listen to it. So you had an audience, or you will have an audience of more than who was on this call today, and we intend to plug back into the climate week as well, as just we want to look at other climate weeks, the other regional climate weeks going forward. So with that, thank you very much. And I wish you a good rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.